Hi all. Sorry I'm a little late. Almost a minute. Oh my
Oh,
God.
we'll forgive you.
Good to see you all and some new faces, which is great. Welcome to the MAP during COVID, which stands for making a plan, addressing the needs of your pet, appointing caregivers, and publishing. We say that all the time so that everybody knows. This program was created post-COVID because it is so important to make sure that you have a plan for your pets if you get sick. And for those of us who are breeders, that our owners also have a plan for the pets that include us mostly, if something happens to them. So I'm so glad all of you are here. When we start, we introduce ourselves and say hello. A few are repeat offenders, but some, especially Connie and Diane, I'm glad to see you guys. But Sally, welcome, and Eileen, welcome. Great to see you, and looking forward to hearing how you've been navigating COVID and the times. I know that Eileen had puppies during this time, as did I. So that sort of took a little bit of the edge off of COVID.
Yeah.
But exchanging the puppies at that time is a little difficult as well. And some of us have had emergency visits to the vet. And so without further ado, Diane, I'm going to start with you real quick. How's everything going? I see you're here, so that means either you're not working or you've been given a longer leave.
I am here and I am officially unemployed. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, truthfully. I have very mixed feelings about it because I really didn't, I couldn't make myself go back into these people's little unventilated trailers and old messed up houses and not knowing how many grandkids were scurrying around. And so in a way, it's a good thing. Obviously, I've never been unemployed in my life, so it's all new to me. But I got on the internet, I filed my unemployment thing. I'm looking for jobs, obviously, but at this point, I'm, 13 months from retiring anyway. So if I can pick up something here or there, I will. Sometimes things happen for a reason.
Absolutely. A door closes, a window opens. Or a window closes, a door opens. I can't remember the way that goes.
Whatever. Rigel thinks the door should be permanently opened.
So do mine.
And Connie will be very pleased to hear we went back to class last night and I learned rally, Connie, which is not my thing. But Rigel and I did rally last night with a mask that a dear friend, Irish setter breeder of mine in Tucson made for me, where I could put a filter in it. Rally was okay with a mask. Agility was a bit more difficult when you're running courses with a wet mask across your face because it's 100 degrees. But we had a really good time, and Rigel was just absolutely exhausted when we got home, which is the first time she's been exhausted in 2 months. And Chase was all pissed off that I took Rigel.
Right.
But other than that, it was really nice to get back out to see people and do things with the dogs. And the person I train with, we were able to effectively do social distancing. He preset the chairs 6 feet apart, only he was the only one who touched equipment. And it worked out very well. So I was very pleased.
Great. So Connie, how did your week go?
Well, actually, speaking of rally, we had our very, very first rally practice last Friday afternoon in the park in Torrance, South Bay, LA area, where we always practice. And this is a group of people who have been together for years with the rally instructor who started us out. And she's now just one of the gang and just comes and sets the course. And we donate to a rescue group that she and her husband are involved with, and Best Friends, Animal Society, as a matter of fact. And so she decided to get us going because the parks were reopening. And she checked it out to make sure that people and dogs were welcome in the park, and talked to the park ranger first. And he said, fine as long as people keep
Social
wearing
distance.
masks, socially distance. And so that's what we did. We set up very explicit rules. Pardon me, my 14-month-old is after a squirrel outside, so that's the whining going on in the back.
Well, none of us have that at our house.
Yeah, right. I know.
I have the dog chasing a fly around the house, so it's not a problem. You'll see him fly past me.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. But at any rate, so each of us waited with our dogs, with our hatches open in the backs of our cars, and as each person exited the course, the next one went on.
So it's working out.
It worked out beautifully. We had 5 people come out. We'll probably have more people, as things open, word of mouth, and as things open up. And again, the park ranger came by, talked to Stacy, the organizer, and she assured him that everything was going fine, and he could see that people were respectful and working it out with their dogs, and it was great. And I came home feeling really, really good, and the dogs had a ball.
Yeah, especially after we've all been on here, I think like 5 or 6 weeks together living through the COVID. I want to welcome Sally and Eileen. So you can see that this is a really a compassionate group, wondering how we're going to get back to taking our dogs out and doing things with our dogs. At the beginning, we were talking specifically and only about making a plan for our pets, and we always close with that at the end, and we talk about all the things that you need to do to make sure your pets are safe. But let's start with Eileen. Tell us a little bit about yourself and what you're looking forward to getting out of joining us today.
Well, I know Deborah since I don't know when, but I started breeding Irish setters in the 70s. And for the past 7 years, I've been in Havanese. I've downsized. I still have one Irish setter who's 12 and a half.
She's beautiful.
I've been lucky because I had a litter of just 2, but they kept me busy, which was wonderful. I'm a psychologist, and I've been doing online evaluations, which is quite a challenge working with 3-year-olds online, but the money's coming in again, so that's helpful. And I just, found a home for my one puppy. Met the people down in New Rochelle at my friend's house. We stayed outdoors, and it seems like a wonderful home, so I'm very pleased with that. And I wanted to make a new MAP plan because things have changed.
Yeah, it does. I mean, things change all the time. And thank you so much. I had 2 too. I had 2 puppies as well.
Right. Yeah, yours were just a little older than mine. Yeah.
Right. I had 2 girls. Eileen had a boy and a girl, which is nice. And now we're also trying to navigate getting the second puppy from one of the people who is going to own a puppy. I'm not keeping a puppy now, which is sort of ripping my heart out of my throat, as most of you would know. If you bred litters or had dogs, it's hard to say this isn't the right time. But I live in a rental, and I have to travel all over the country to figure out where I'm going to land finally. So I'm probably going to give it to someone who's a repeat offender of Rumrays and Irish setters. Yes. So a repeat offender, and that would be great. She's a great home. However, she lives in Ohio and has many underlying health issues. So, the MAP plan will definitely be something she'll put together before she takes the puppy. I know she has one now for her other dog that she got from me. But we're going to really talk about, how do you do that? So before I get off into space, let me go to Sally. Sally, welcome. Tell us a little bit about yourself and why you're here.
Well, thank you. It's nice to be with you all. I have very barky corgis, Pembroke Welsh corgis.
I love corgis. My son wants one of those.
Yeah. So, and I actually learned about this through Mary Ellen McNerney, who I know, maybe you all know, but some of you know.
Yep.
Yes, and she went from Irish setters, to the dark side of Pembroke Welsh corgis, but that's okay.
It's okay.
That's how we met and have become, very good friends as a result, because we don't live too far apart. I am interested. I do mostly conformation with my dogs, but I ended up taking one of my older dog to a herding instinct test that our Garden State Corgi Club does, and she really took to it. So now I have 2 herding dogs, as well as a year-old puppy. And it's been nice because I've been able to go for herding lessons, you know, because it's outside and it's just the instructor and, you know, and me and the dog. So,
And
but
it's
the
fun.
reason I was interested in this is thinking about, okay, what happens if something happens to me, you know, with my dogs? And I've begun to do some of that, but Mary Ellen suggested that, you know, this would be a good webinar to participate in.
Oh, wonderful. Well, we're so glad you're here. And I know that Connie has been with me the longest, I think, because she and I put her MAP plan together after her husband became ill. And Diane has been on this program since the beginning. We talk every week about different things to do. We talk about what you should already have done, which is made a plan. Now, in the dog show world, we are our own worst enemy. Over a glass of wine, how many of us have made a plan with our friends on who's going to take whom and what will happen? And of course, I'll take your dogs. And I know Eileen was instrumental in an older one of our really important breeder owners, helping her when she had dementia. She wasn't dead yet. So any plan she had in her will didn't come to fruition. And Eileen really had to step in. But Eileen, if you don't mind, don't use any names, but it was a little difficult, as I recall, because there was another family member, a husband there, who really didn't have a lot of connection to the dogs, but also didn't necessarily know what his wife wanted to do. And I might be getting this totally wrong, Eileen, but I think I remember it correctly. And you had to really work your magic to get the dogs out, to rehome them because their care was faltering. And she had English Cockers as well, I think, right?
No, American Cockers.
American Cockers.
And her brother had power of attorney. Her husband was completely out of the picture. He did nothing. But for about a year, I went over there with her brother and sister-in-law and tried to clean and delouse the house and bring the dogs to the vet. And finally, it reached the point where she just could not take care of them at all. And they were planning on putting her in a memory care facility. So I took the Irish, and a friend of hers took the Cockers. And it was awful. But she called the police, actually, on me. She said I stole her dogs. But I was able to give the brother's name, and he straightened it out. It was an awful experience. For a while, she remembered them, and she grieved for them, and then she forgot about them completely. But she had always said that she was going to have dogs until the very end because she made provisions for her dogs, but she hadn't. She hadn't made adequate provisions at all, and it was very sad.
I know. And so Eileen probably knows the story of how the MAP plan came about. I know that Diane and Connie, I'll do it quickly, I promise. So I broke my ankle in 2013 and I had 9 dogs who ate in the basement. It's really hard to get down a flight of stairs with a broken ankle, and I realized, ooh, this was pretty stupid. At the same time, the 2 people who had said they'd take care of my pets, you know, that glass of wine where we talk to our friends who are going to take care of our pets if something happens to us. One was renovating her kennel and the other had just broken her wrist, so they couldn't help. And my husband turned to me and said, I'm taking care of you, not your dogs. So I realized I had left a huge gap in my pet care and my pet plan because I wasn't dead yet. In the beginning, this program was called I'm Not Dead Yet, because we all plan for the care of our pets when we're dead. Well, some of us do, but none of us ever care for our pets when we're sick. And that goes for a virus, that goes for a broken bone, that goes for dementia. I say it's the 6 Ds: death, divorce, dementia, disability, delay, and disease. So it really is important to make sure that you have it in writing and that it's easy to find. We talked on previous webinars, and it's always important to reiterate, you need to have the information for where your dogs are going easily discoverable by the EMS people who might be coming into your home, especially if you live alone. And even if you live with someone, they are worried about you. They are not going to remember, you know, who it is that's going to take the dogs if you're heading to the hospital. So it's always easier to have a 5x8 card. If you only have 3x5s, okay. Big black magic marker. In case of emergency, please leave the dogs in the home and call these numbers. Do not take them to the shelter, because once they're in the shelter, unless you have it in writing that this person is able to get the dogs out of the shelter, it can really become a huge issue. You own them. You're in the hospital. We spoke before about, and some of you might have seen on my Facebook page about the woman who had the 9-year-old Afghan. She went to the hospital. She had broken something, and then she had to go to rehabilitation. And Animal Care and Control said, "Oh, don't worry, we'll keep the dog till you come out." Well, she didn't remember her phone because she was in her 70s, and a lot of people who are in her 70s, I only take my phone with me now so I can count my steps because I need to know at the end of the day that I did 10,000. But I don't necessarily take my phone with me everywhere. And she lived alone, and they left the phone in the house, and nobody called her. And the dog was actually given to a rescue by Animal Care and Control, adopted by someone from the rescue. And if any of you, which you may not have, but if any of you have dealt with rescues, they have really good ironclad rescue and adoption contracts that don't allow you to find where your dog went, because they presume that if you don't get in touch with them to get your dog back, or you haven't gotten in touch with Animal Care and Control to get your dog back, then you're not getting your dog back. They're placing it. So for me, the biggest piece, everybody has that little card in their wallet, and if they don't, write me and I'll mail you one because I have tons of them, that says, in case of emergency, I have dogs at home and please call these people. But somebody has to look for that. And I'm a big proponent of redundancy and very easy to find. Please do not make it terribly hard for the police officer or the EMS workers to see the card that says, in case of emergency, call these people to care for my dogs. Do not take them to a shelter. And have 3 numbers, 3, not 1, not 2, 3. Because now with COVID, it used to be that, you could call your breeder who might be a state away because they'll hop in the car and come over and get the animal. Now it has to be a neighbor. I actually walked up and down the street of my new neighborhood and told everyone, if something happens, here's my number. I'll be happy to take care of your dog. And 3 of them said to me, well, I'd be happy to take care of your dogs too. So I took their name and number. It's always about giving first and receiving in return. So if you have neighbors in your development, in your apartment, near your home, if you live out in the woods, find someone who you can call, who EMS can call if you can't, to come and take care of your pets, because you don't want them leaving. And then have that domino effect, that redundancy where, okay, the neighbor's only going to have to take care of the dog for a few days until Deborah comes and picks up her dog. That's what happened with the Afghan. The neighbor took care of the dog for 3 weeks. And then the person who went into the hospital, not the Afghan, this was another cat who was left alone, and the neighbor took care of it for 3 weeks. The person died, and then they called the shelter, and the ASPCA came, and the cat was traumatized getting caught by ASPCA in its apartment, and now is up for adoption. It's 11 years old. No way did any of these people think that this was going to happen to them. I mean, I know we're all going to live to be the ripe old age of 101 or 2 and be healthy and moving around. But in the interim, making a plan is the most important piece. So for Sally and Eileen, you have to really sit down and make a plan. And that means you have to sit down and say, well, if something happened to me, how would I want this to play out? Would I want the dogs to stay in my house and somebody to come over and take care of them? Would I want the dogs to go somewhere and then come back to me? Eileen spoke about the woman who had Alzheimer's and, on again, off again, knew about her pets. Well, there is that issue that when people have Alzheimer's, sometimes they do much better and stay grounded much longer if you leave the pets with them. But then you have to make a plan with someone like Eileen and understand that that person comes in and takes care of the pets. It could be a younger person. It could be a high school student that would come take care of the pets during the day, and you could have them just as pets as opposed to having to care for them. But if you don't put this in writing, it's never going to happen. And sometimes you have to really, while you're still with it like we are, say, listen, if I give, Susie Jones the power to decide, if I, especially when you're diagnosed with something that has a memory issue, I give this person power to decide when the dogs are going to leave me. That's making the plan, and make it now. I mean, none of us are going to have Alzheimer's. None of us are going to have a stroke. All of us are going to close our eyes, with our Irish setters next to us, or our Havanese or our Corgis next to us. And that's going to be it. And it'll be great. And then everybody will come in, and your executor, your veterinarian, whomever is in line to get your pets will already know. they'll have that packet in their hand, and they'll say, listen, this is what Sally wanted to do. This is what Eileen wanted to do and Connie wanted to do, because it is imperative that it's in writing. So the MAP plan stands, as I started the program, the MAP plan stands for the 4 parts you need to have, which is you need to make the plan, which is the most important piece. And that takes a lot of time. If I get sick, this is what I want to happen. If I die, this is what I want to have happen. Write it out. And then you have to address the needs of each pet. So the Havanese have different personalities. The puppy is different from the older dog. The Irish setter is different from the Havanese. The Corgi is different, older one, younger one. Totally different animals. They're afraid of thunder. They're not afraid of thunder. They're allowed to go with each other. They're not. They don't really like each other. You know, we all have personalities, and they all have personalities. And you also want to have redundancy in appointing caregivers. So if you have anyone in your list of caregivers, you have to have at least 3. And the 4th one should be your breed-specific, nationally supported rescue. Because if all else fails, you know the rescue, for us an Irish setter on the East Coast here, it would be in Cuchero. There's probably 8 or 10 rescue coordinators who have supported the Irish Setter Club of America rescue that you can appoint as the last person if no one else can come. And at least you know they're going to evaluate your dogs, keep your dogs safe, and place them with Irish Setter loving people. So that's the part that you can do. And then the last part, which is the most important part, I gave a program out in California in, I think, 2015 or 16. And there were 60 people at this program at the, it was for the 4 setters, the black, the Gordon, the Irish, the English, and the red and white. And a woman made the entire MAP plan, and she didn't do the P. She missed the P. She filed it. She did a great job. She filed it. And her husband didn't know, and somebody came in and said to her, listen, I know, said to him, who was the executor of the will, I know where she wanted the dogs to go. I will take them. And he let the dogs go. And when the people who she had given the plan to came, she didn't give it to her executor, but she gave it to the people who were supposed to take the dogs. He said, I gave the dogs to Susie Smith, and she placed them. And Susie Smith said, well, they're in great homes, and I'm not telling you where. And you'll have to sue the executor who is grieving his wife in order to get this overturned. And that'll cost a lot of money. Are you going to do that? And so these co-owners were kind enough to walk away, but do you want that to happen to your dogs? No. So when you have puppies, or if you have a co-owner, making sure they know that you're making this plan, making sure they know, you know, you could be the first. I co-own all the dogs that go out of my house. I'm the first one on the, you know, the caregiver list. But I always want to know who your next door neighbor is, who loves this dog, who this dog loves, because I am more than happy to leave that dog in that environment that it understands and knows than to bring it home to my wacko house. But I have to know. So that's what's the most important. And you have to publish it. You have to publish every plan you make, and that not just with your attorney, which is great, but with your executor, your husband, your children, your veterinarian, absolutely. All the caregivers have to know about all the other caregivers. So if I appoint the 4 of you, all of you will know that there's another person there. If you can't take it, you know to call Diane. And if you know to call Sally, you know to call Eileen, because it's so important that, hold on a minute, I'm sure this is, you know that this is really important to you, and that you know who is the person to call. So if all of you don't have this in place, it's a piece-by-piece program. So for Sally and Eileen, I know that Diane is working on it as well, and I know Connie has it really pretty much up to date, because she and I just did it. Eileen, if you're redoing yours, you really need to make sure that you, when you do it, and when you update it, you alert the people who you're appointing, and you alert your vet, your attorney as well, because everyone has to know that they're there. It can't be that, well, I'm just going to tell Connie about it, and Connie will take the dogs. This is someone who's going to drive me nuts, I think, but that's okay. They'll have to leave a message. Anyway, I just want to, I'm glad I went through that again because it's been a long time since we've gone through each of the steps. And do you, Eileen or Sally, do you have any questions? Because this recording will come
Can
back
I
to
download the form again?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Just go to the website. The forms are there. If you signed up before, they're right there for you. I'm sure that Rose will let everyone know how to download the forms to fill them in. It's really important. I also today wanted to check in and see how everything's going in making the plans. So Connie, you're up to date pretty much, correct? You haven't had much change.
That's correct. I think as you're aware, I've got a horrible family situation, you know, with my husband's daughters, and we are getting a divorce. This after 32 years of marriage. They are the wicked witches of the West, literally. I'm in LA, they're up in Sacramento.
Oh God.
Where he is now. So at any rate, as soon as the divorce is final, we're in the settlement phase right now. Don't get me started. My attorney, Cynthia Cox, whom you know,
Right.
and I are going to update everything. In fact, she just checked in with me a couple of weeks ago. But thank you for the opportunity. I just wanted to jump in with Eileen and Sally on the making your rescue organization, your breed rescue, your default. I have one of the other crazy Irish breeds. I have soft-coated Wheaten Terriers. And Sally, as a matter of fact, I put a herding title on one of my boys who is now an angel in heaven. But love herding and have lots of corgi friends with whom we do rally and obedience too. But at any rate, I was rescue chair in my local breed club after I stepped down from the presidency. And we have had instances where there have been people who have had show dogs, retired show dogs, who have died, and their kids didn't want the dog, you know, like Deborah talks about. And so in one case, the dog went back to a breeder judge friend of mine who lives in the Palm Springs area. And she is elderly, she's 87. And she couldn't take the dog back. She had about a 12 or 13-year-old Wheaten who was her last Wheaten of her own. And so she came to me for a breeder assist placement for rescue. And we found a wonderful family. The dog was only 4 years old, beautiful dog, and he went to a wonderful home. My best friend, also out in the Palm Springs area, is also a Wheaten breeder like me. And she is the rescue chair now. And she just got a dog in the middle of all this COVID mess from Santa Barbara. Lady had dementia. The dog got out and attacked a neighbor dog. And so the assisted living place where she is living said the dog's got to go. So the dog is now in foster care, and we have quite a few people on the list who want the dog. But that's an example, you know, of the fact that you just don't know what's going to happen. But the breed club rescue is there as a default. Then your dog is taken care of.
And we, as breed clubs, we always support our rescue. So it is really imperative to trust them to find the dog owner that's the right dog owner. If the people you've appointed can't take it, and I loved when Connie said, you know, your kids can't take it. I love my children, and my son Thomas would take all of my dogs, but he rented an apartment in a no pet building. Not too smart if, like, I drop off the face of the earth. He can't take my dogs. Right. So it really is important. I usually say at this point that also for guilt reasons, you need to not just leave it to your kids, but to leave it to someone else. Because if your kids can't take it, i.e. Thomas has an apartment that has no dogs, you know that you can leave it. So in my case, they go to Susie Sullivan. And then if Thomas moves to an apartment that allows animals, Susie knows that Thomas can then get the dog back. So it's this written instruction that people cannot be fluid with, that they make their own opinions or their own judgments. No, this is really what you want to have happen. So Diane, how are you doing on yours?
I'm doing slow but sure. I've been intermittently reading the stuff, that I downloaded from your site. But I've also truthfully been looking for a job and a few other minor details.
But you have your 3x5
but-
cards up in the car and on the refrigerator, right?
Well, yeah, actually, I have two 8x10s on the refrigerator and my bedroom door because if I'm not home, my dogs are either laying on my bed or crated in the bedroom, depending if they're young or old. So that's where if I was not home and something happened, you would find the information. If I'm here, it's also on the refrigerator. And then I've got one in the car and one in the motorhome. And I've actually contacted my brother, who, if something happened to both me and Mark, my brother would be, basically the person to have to deal with everything. He has a copy of an email that says who to call because he is not a dog person. He actually was on a video chat with me one day, and Chase jumped up on the bed and he went, "Oh my God, that's a big dog." And I'm like, "Oh my gosh, do I have a problem?"
Yep.
So he has specific information as to who the breeder is of each of my dogs, who in the ideal world would get them, but who due to COVID he should call. And the three people on my map or on my signs, they're not really on the plan yet because it's not published, but one of them actually is my vet, who is my best friend. So she's one of my three people. And actually we talked about it last night at Agility because the other two were at Agility last night. And I'm like, you are on my plan. Remember this, okay? Your name is there. If something happens to me, nobody else is supposed to remove my dogs from my house. She's like, except us three. And I'm like, yes, except you three. And she's like, I really need to do that at my house. And I'm like, yes, you do.
Yes,
So,
Wednesdays at noon. Be there
yes.
Wednesdays at noon.
Yes, so I sent her, I forwarded the email, but of course it was 10 o'clock last night when I got home. But yeah, so we're actually activating things, but I just don't have it all in writing. And when I get a job, Deb, I'm going to hire you to actually put it in writing the correct way for me.
Well, I'm happy to help you put it in some writing form now, because it really is, that is the publishing is the single most important, because talking to people is great. But if the police come to your house or EMS comes to your house, or if they take your dogs and somebody has to get them out of the shelter, they have to have a piece of paper. So bring your friends from class and let's talk about how they can help you write that piece of paper, because they know they're supposed to do it, but nobody else who's in power, police, shelters, rescues, they're the ones with all the power when the dogs are taken. So to be able to have something that's dated and notarized, somebody has to be a notary, so that they know that in the event something happens to me, these three people have the power to care for my pets. I mean, simple 2 sentences, and have the three people, their numbers, and have them sign on the bottom saying, yes, I do so swear that this is what I'm going to do, and then notarize it. Because it really makes a big difference between making this plan in your head and having it on paper. Eileen, how did this go for you today? Are you overwhelmed? Don't be overwhelmed.
Good refresher. No, since all this happened with the pandemic, I had also thought about adding a young person, because my friends are my age. And, if they get wiped out too, I need to have someone young to take over.
It really is true. And neighbors, because what we found
Yeah.
with this, which was really interesting, is, all the people who I have, I mean, Susie's in Maryland, and, though she was here for 6 weeks during COVID for the puppies, if she wasn't here, she might not have been able to get here.
Yeah, I have people a little bit distance, but within less than an hour. So.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And
They're
that would
okay.
and if they're in New York, they should be able to get to you.
They're in New York.
It was such a shocking thing to happen, this COVID, because people were afraid of helping and were afraid of coming into New York, the epicenter. If you're in New York, fine. You're already infected and we're all a merry group. But if you weren't in New York, people really did stop and say, do I really? And then you have to 14-day quarantine in New York and 14-day quarantine when you get home. It was huge.
Well, even here in the West, I shared last week that a very dear friend of mine, who's a rally and obedience judge, was going to pick up. She has Belgian Turf right now, who's 10, and she was going to pick up a puppy in Denver. And the governor of Colorado said, with the tourist season coming up, this was a week before Memorial Day, he didn't want any out-of-staters coming into Colorado this summer. So there went.
But you know, Connie, I looked that up because our national's going to be in Colorado. There's nothing in writing. So, I mean, it's nice that she's abiding by what somebody's verbally saying, which is very unusual in this day and age because everybody seems to be arguing and protesting what people are doing for health. But there is nothing in writing saying that you can't go into Colorado right now, because I did check that out.
Yeah, it's a governor, probably a governor's letter, and it possibly is or is not enforceable. But, you know, people are law abiding, especially if they're over 62 and have underlying health issues. That would really dictate to me that I wouldn't make that trip.
Right.
Sally, was this helpful to you? You're sort of new to this craziness.
I've been making notes as sorry.
That's right. We always have dog barking.
Yeah, pardon me?
We always have dogs barking.
Yes, well, and mine can bark excessively. It's very helpful, yes, and I've been making a lot of notes, and I have relatives who live 15 minutes from me. I have a number of Corgi friends who are very close. So I was starting to make a list for my cousin and her husband about everything, you know, not just the dogs, but also, you know, myself and mortgage and, you know, will and all that stuff. So this is helpful. It is overwhelming, yes, but I figure I can do it piece by piece. Because I do have in my mind, you know, what I want to happen. So it's a matter of getting it all down on a piece of paper.
Yeah, and publishing it. So the piece of paper is only, it's this big. It's very important, you know, who it is and what their numbers are and what each dog, because that's the make the plan part, what each dog needs or eats or afraid of or not afraid of and who it should be with. But the most important part is when you pick those caregivers, you let them know, you give them a copy of the plan, which addresses the needs of each pet. And, you know, when you give, I mean, as simple as when do you give heartworm? What medications are the dogs on? Do they get along with dogs, you know, on a leash? Do they get along with dogs, you know, off leash? What is it? I mean, our dogs are pretty bomb proof. Some of us have dogs who are squirrel, chipmunk, and robin haters. Mine, Junie, and he goes into orbit. He's the most beautifully mannered dog on a leash unless he sees a chipmunk or a squirrel or a robin. So people need to know that, because you'll be walking down the street thinking, oh, this dog is so nice. He is so well behaved on a leash. And then a squirrel will go by and you will lose your left arm. So you really need to tell people that. It seems intuitive to us because you would never not pay attention to your dog's body language, but it's always nice to know. It's always nice to know that somebody will hide in the bathtub. My dog Atticus that lives with Susie Sullivan, I co-own him. He's petrified of thunderstorms and lives in the bathtub during thunderstorms. That's nice to know, because when the dog disappears, you want to know where he is. You know, he's going
And
be
to watch out for bloat.
Exactly.
With an Irish setter.
Absolutely. Right. The good news is, Eileen, he does not pant. He just lays there in the cold tub. And thank God he doesn't pant, because I would be a crazy person. But you're absolutely, I would have tacked him. For his fear of thunder, if he panted the way he does, I would have tacked him, because he definitely could bloats. And, you know, I always tell people who take my puppies, you know, I've had bloat, except in the last 2 generations, I've had one bloat in every single litter I've ever had. So it's there. It's something to be aware of. It's not something to necessarily be afraid of, but to be aware of.
Remind me at some point offline to tell you something about that. But like another really good example is I have 2 girls that do not get along.
Yeah.
Unless I am physically there. And so if it wasn't me, they would fight. If somebody else let them out together, they would fight. I have control because I'm alpha. Yeah. But if somebody else came into my house, they'd have a dog fight if they let these 2 bitches out together. So
Well, I don't know if you were there at the New England National when we had the fire drill in the rain. I know, Eileen, you were there. And we had 300 Irish
It
setters,
was lightning struck the
lightning
roof.
striking, and we're standing my metal X-Pens with our dogs in the teeming rain. And the electricity went out in the hotel, and I had 2 dogs and 2 bitches, each of whom were in season. And I had 2 intact males. So imagine trying to do that. And, you know, as I said, you know, it's the best of worlds in the dog show world, because people who knew I had 4 dogs and I was alone came and knocked on the door. They didn't have any dogs. They took one of them. But we have to put that in writing. We really do when things happen, because at that moment, everyone was taking dogs. Who cares? I think everybody ended up with the dog they came with. I'm not quite sure, but I know I ended up with the dog I came with. They give them back quickly. But
yeah, they give mine back quickly.
right? They give them back quickly. But, you know, when you're not able to care for them because of, you know, I loved when Eileen said, you know, this woman wanted to keep the dogs until she couldn't care for them anymore. And we really do want to keep the dogs. I mean, I want to die with a dog on my bed. I can tell you that. I really don't want to, because I'm 80, decide not to have a dog. I mean, there's really no reason to get up in the morning, in my humble opinion, if I don't have somebody that needs me as I get up in the morning. So I want to do that, but you have to recognize that when you get older, there's very infinite reasons why you need to have this plan in place. Even if you're younger, we all know young people who've had car accidents and left us. I mean, there was a handler just the other day who had a big truck full of dogs, and something happened. The truck had an accident. She passed away, and all the dogs in the truck, they were all rescued, returned to their owners. But she's a young woman. So it's not just for us, the over 25 group. It is for everyone to make these plans. So if you're at an event, you know, tell them to join us. I'm not selling anything. I'm helping people know what it is that they should do. And if they want to, you know, take the programs, I think if you open up your chat box, we put the link to both the Pet Passport and the MAAP program there, so you know where to go on my website to find it. But you really just need to come to the Wednesday events, and I tell you all about it. So, you know, there's no need to render any cost here. I just want to make sure that no one here has.
Sorry.
That's right. No one here has happened to me. What happened to me? I don't want them to be sitting there when their husband says I'm not taking care of the dogs. And he loves my dogs. Don't get me wrong, but he was in overwhelm because I took care of everything. So there I was laid up. So it's now 12:43. Can you believe I went so far over? You know, I'm pretty good about that 30-minute thing, and I appreciate everybody staying. As we
Can
close,
I just ask, is that Michelle's dog and Michelle okay? The dog that had the kidney problems, because
yes,
she's not
Michelle, yeah, she's not here. Michelle had a meeting today, so she couldn't come. Sally had a meeting today, so she couldn't
here. Okay,
come.
all right, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I just wanted to make
Yeah,
sure
no,
she
no,
was
reach
okay.
out to her, but she said to me, everything is still going really well. We had, so for the newbies, we have Michelle Pike, and we have Sally Anderson Bruce. Sally is an Irish setter owner, and Michelle is, what kind of dog does she have, Diane? I can't believe I can't remember.
I can't either. Connie, what does she have?
I think she has I want to say a Frenchie, but I might be wrong. But anyway, it had a kidney issue. So
It's
what?
a bigger.
I ever knew.
It's a
I think
bigger
I knew.
dog.
10 lashes that I don't remember. But anyway, I'm so glad all of you came. I hope you come back. We continue to talk about what's in the news usually. Today I was going to talk about as well the young girl who went ballistic on the black gentleman, and the way in which she held her dog was very disconcerting, but now she's lost her job and her dog. And does that really solve the problem of what happened? No. But we'll take up those political issues some other time. But I thought it was interesting that the dog went back to the rescue. I think that may be the best, but it's really interesting how things are getting so different in this world, and need to be sort of chatted about in a collaborative and peaceful way. So I on that note, I also wanted to maybe have another. Oh. But don't forget about the tortoise. If you know anyone with tortoises, have them come on, because I posted on my Facebook page the 62-year-old tortoise who is in need of a home.
Yeah, I saw that on Facebook.
Yeah.
The
It's
dinner
very-
plate.
She's adorable.
Yeah, she's adorable, and I had turtles, so I know there are tortoise and turtle rescues, but she lived the lap of luxury, and I wish that woman had come to the MAP plan so she could have made a plan to, because I'm sure there might have been people in her life who would have taken care of the tortoise going forward, but she didn't make a plan, and unfortunately, once it goes into rescue, it's so hard to get it out, even if you're the person that Deborah wanted to take her dog or her tortoise, it's so hard to get it out, which is why, please God, put it in writing and publish it so people have that piece of paper that says, in the event something happens to me, these 3 people have the ability to care for my pets. And it's so important. Notarize it, because if you notarize it, it's even better. On that note, any questions, any remaining questions?
How do you get the links when we get off Zoom?
I think what you can do is cut and paste them and put them on a note on your computer. So if you highlight all the link, I think also this three box thing, it saves the chat. Yeah, you can save the chat if you do the 3. What I usually do is I cut and paste. I highlight it all and I move it to a note, because then that keeps the links live. But you'll be getting this recording, so when you go back, you can just go to the recording and go forward until the links show up, and you'll be all done. And I look forward to speaking to all of you. If you can come back next Wednesday, we're going to continue to do this as long as people really want to communicate about the care of their pets long-term, short-term, and to help people really get to that place where they make the plan. Kiss your dogs and cats and birds and horses for me.
Okay.
This
Thank
is
you so
Deborah
much.
Hamilton.
Nice to
and
meet you all.
Nice to meet you all.
Okay, bye.
Thanks.
Bye.